Roll call.
Amanda Harness.
Here.
Anthony David.
Present.
Sarah Moses.
Here.
Ariel Owens. Present. Jeremy Olson.
Here.
Lisa Ramirez.
Present.
David Simon.
Present.
First up is public participation recognition. Public comment is first. Members of the public who wish to speak to the board. Did I skip something?
Do we have a pledge?
We did it before.
Oh.
Closed session.
Okay, sorry.
Members of the public who wish to speak to the board should complete a request card prior to the start of the meeting. This section of the meeting will be reserved for comments from the public. All comments should be limited to 3 minutes. Criticism of individuals is not in order. So first comment we have is Ms. Dina Sweet from DCTA, Culture and Climate of the District.
Hi, good evening.
Hello.
We come here today representing the majority of the employees in this district, including the union groups of teachers, assistants, secretaries, and maintenance and custodial. We're concerned about the culture and climate in the district. We've brought several proposals to the board and administration to collectively impact bargain, and not only has the district not approved them, but has taken an exorbitant amount of time in responding to them. All of the proposals seek to ensure that staff are given flexibility and respect regarding COVID-related issues. This in turn allows staff to be more available for the students of our district. It's no secret that in the education world we are facing tremendous shortages, and CUSD428 is no exception. We have already had staff take leave of absences, leave the district for other educational positions, and even leave education altogether. The staff that remains feels as though their needs, not wants, but needs, are trivialized, and that when there is an opportunity to acknowledge these concerns, the board and administration ignores them. While we cannot force you to respect us, you do have a responsibility to impact bargain with us in good faith when there's a change in working conditions. It's your responsibility to, as noted in your strategic plan, develop a recruitment and succession action plan with alignment to the diversity plan to ensure a full and high-quality candidate pool. What about the dedicated staff that are here day in and day out, working with our students? I don't exactly know what almost $1 million in new central administrators will do for our students, but I certainly know what our custodians, maintenance, secretaries, assistants, support staff, and teachers do. We need honest and transparent conversations. We need real impact bargaining. We need time-efficient communication. We need non-punitive options for COVID-related issues. It's your responsibility to protect and care for the essential employees of this district. We ask you to do better because if we don't, it's not only going to hurt our staff, but the students and D428 as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Mary Ellen Larson, DFSA, Support Staff.
Throughout this pandemic, most of the support staff has worked in person to keep our schools open and running. Many of us have been impacted by COVID-19, and what we asked during impact bargaining was to provide us with an assurance that if we were unable to work remotely, should we or our family contract COVID-19, that the district partner with us to maintain job security. This pandemic has happened to all of us. The majority of us are vaccinated or are complying with the state mandate to test. We are doing our part and ask that you, the board, be leaders in our community and prioritize a COVID-led agreement to ensure we are protected during this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And next up is Kevin Boland, DCTA, status of the district.
During the superintendent search last year, questions were curated from various stakeholder groups. One of the selected questions posed to the candidates was, how will you build trust? That was a sanitized version of the question that I had asked. The full text was, how will you build trust with a staff that feels that their voices are not being heard? I feel it is important to bring that unadulterated question to you today. Where exactly do our priorities lie? In a staff meeting earlier this year, the question was asked, how many of you have considered quitting? Nearly everyone in the room raised their hand. We are exhausted and we feel disrespected. Class sizes across the district are sky high. My smallest class size is 34. The district added a new department at the Ed Center and more staff to fill it. It seems we don't have a month go by without a new FTE request for the Ed Center. Union leadership has asked for proposals with a deadline, been asked for proposals with the deadline of a matter of a few days, and it takes weeks to receive a response. We've asked to impact bargain the effects of this pandemic and state mandates that have had an impact on all of our staff. And the response that we get from the administration and school board is that we do not see this as a change in working conditions. That may be true in this building, but spend a week in the shoes of a bus driver, an assistant, a custodian, or a teacher, and then tell me that our working conditions have not changed. You crow about how many action items that have been completed on the strategic plan and conduct a salary study for administrative positions. But then we fail to meet a contractual obligation for salary adjustments for our teachers. All of this begs the question again, where do our priorities lie? I conclude by posing the question to you again. How will you build trust with a staff that feels that their voices are not being heard and that they are not being respected? Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all for public comment. Next up is board committee reports and correspondence. And first off, I would like to just introduce and welcome to the school board our newest school board member, who is our student school board member. This is Chance Kenya Kalin. And Chance is a sophomore at DeKalb High School. Welcome. And then, does anyone have anything to share during committee reports and correspondence?
Real quick, last Thursday, we held another focus group. I guess that's what we called it, correct?
Sure, for the community?
For the community. We had a small turnout, not as large as what we had in the spring, but we did have a great turnout. And this was to help with our strategic planning. So thank the community for those that did come out and wanted to participate. The feedback that we received just only helps us move forward with input from what the community is hoping that we do. So that was good. And then last week we also had a curriculum meeting that I attended.
Good. Thank you. Anybody else? Any updates? I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to share a press release from the board that we are going to go ahead and send out. It's going to read it to the public now, and then we'll be sending it out. And it says, Dear Community, DeKalb Community 428. The DeKalb Community Unit School District 428 Board of Education would like to share our current state in terms of class size in order to help our community understand the moment we are in and the options in front of us. The Board of Education prioritizes raising student achievement, providing teachers resources and support, and being fiscally responsible with taxpayer dollars. The following is an update on our joint cooperative endeavors with school leaders, unions, and community members to ensure our classroom sizes are conducive to a quality educational environment that promotes learning. During the 2019 contract negotiations, the Board of Education agreed to collaborate with the Teachers Union, DCTA, to form an advisory task force to develop pupil-teacher ratios that promote learning within the limits of facilities, finance, and other considerations in pre-K through 12th grade and related services. The task force primary goal is to recommend the Board of Education to maintain or achieve these ratios as allowed by the limits. Board members, DCTA members, and community members rolled up their sleeves. They worked, sorted through many scenarios, ideas, possibilities, logistics, research, and survey data to develop the following 5 recommendations. The following recommendations were brought to the Board of Education by the task force during our May 18, 2021 board meeting. All 5 were approved unanimously. Number 1 is spring of 2021, explored the offering of a permanent remote learning academy that may be staffed independently or internally. Number 2, fall of 2021, provides sufficient staff to maintain the threshold of 28 students for grades K through 5 and 35 students for 6 through 12. Number 3, winter of 2021. Approval of updated demographic study, summer 2021. Study currently underway with results expected by the end of November, beginning of December 2021. This study will be used to review and understand what to expect and how to respond to the changing growth patterns the district can anticipate in the coming years. Number 4, summer 2022. Begin to address facility issues and additional space with an architect to determine where expansion can be made to accommodate the needs. The recommendation of the task force was to add a K through 5 section to every elementary school with the exception of 3. Then expand middle school space for 6th to 8th graders, and then move focus to the high school. There would be the option of a potential referendum to build a new elementary school if necessary. Further clarity will be provided by the results of the demography study and the architect's findings and recommendations. Number 5, summer 2022. Provide sufficient staff to lower the threshold from 28 to 25 students for grades K through 5 and 35 to 30 students, and from 35 to 30 students for grades 6 through 12 when facilities and budgets allow. We are on or ahead of schedule on items 1 through 4. Due to an influx of students this fall, we found the need to add 1 kindergarten class and 1 first grade class. These additional classes were created by moving music classes to an outdoor mobile space and moving art to a cart. Although not ideal, we were committed to ensuring appropriate spacing and classroom size. Currently, we have less than 10 classes over the agreed threshold. However, when class size is not reduced, any teacher with a class over the threshold is paid an additional stipend per semester. The Board of Education reaffirms its commitment to ensuring class sizes are conducive to a quality educational environment. During our September 7th school board meeting, we unanimously voted to approve our goals. Reducing classroom size was identified as our most pressing goal under the facilities category. We have supported the staff, created partnerships and recruitment pipelines, and still positions remain open. We have nearly run out of space and brought in the demographer and the architect. Now we await the results to guide us in the direction of our next move. We recognize that the limitations of facilities and finances will potentially always create challenges. Yet we must be creative. We must look to each other and our community and come together to ensure bright futures for our children by supporting staff and using tax dollars responsibly, because that is our priority. In service, gratitude, on behalf of the Board of Education, Sarah Moses, President. So we'll be sending that out as an update for everyone in the community to know exactly what's been happening in terms of where we're moving with making sure that we're maintaining or moving towards smaller classroom sizes. So next up is a consent agenda. And it is items A through items F. And it is recommended the Board of Education approve items A through F. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Roll call?
Samantha McDavid,
Yes.
Sarah Moses,
Yes.
Ariel Owens,
Yes.
Jeremy Olson,
Yes.
Daisy Ramirez,
Yes.
David Seymour,
Yes.
Amanda Harness.
Yes.
Okay, next up is new business. A, tax levy information presented by Ms. Cynthia Carpenter.
Good evening, everybody. And this is the time of the year that we start our tax levy process. So what I'd like to do before we get into the nuts and bolts of the tax levy for 2021, I'd like to do kind of an overview of the tax levy process and some information to kind of act as a base as we move forward to the next couple of board meetings. So here is just a pie chart of where our sources of revenues come from, so you can get an idea of how much our revenues are generated through our property taxes. So you can see, based on our 2021 actual numbers, our total operating revenue is about $102 million. About 51% of that does come from our property taxes. And then the rest, you can see the largest portion would be our state funding, and the biggest portion of that is our evidence-based funding formula. And then we have some other state sources, about 7%, and about 4% comes from federal sources. So again, the lion's share, about half, is that property tax pie chart. So the tax levy process here is just really a calendar of events that happen. It's a very prescribed process. And what we are doing now is getting estimated assessment information from the county assessor. So what that is called is our equalized assessed value, the value of properties within school district boundaries. What we'll do at our November 16th meeting is I will prepare a tax levy request for that meeting that the board would adopt. And then we need about 20 days before we actually adopt that levy totally. So we have time in between the November 16th meeting and the December 14th meeting to actually adopt that levy. We put that information in the newspaper and make it very public in terms of what we're asking, what our ask is in regards to the tax levy. And then we come back on December 14th to do the actual tax levy adoption. We do have to file a certificate of tax levy by the last Tuesday in December, which would be December 29th, that should say 21 on there, so sorry about that. The actual tax rates are established in March and April of the next year, so in the spring. So when we're going through this tax levy process, we don't know actual equalized assessed values. We're doing everything based on estimates. Then when we actually know those numbers, we actually know our tax rates in the spring. And then once those are established and then the county prepares the tax bills, the taxes get collected and we get our money between May through November approximately. Usually it's November when we get our last distribution. The largest portions come in June and September since that's when the tax bills are due. And then what we do with that revenue is we actually post it to the next fiscal year, the 22-23 fiscal year. So this 21 tax levy process will affect our 22-23 budget. So what we fall under here in DeKalb County is the Property Tax Extension Limitation Law, or PTEL. A lot of people call it the tax cap, although it doesn't really cap amounts, but it does cap how much we could receive each year. And DeKalb County was enacted in 1999, so we've been under this PTEL for quite some time. And what it does, it allows for annual inflation increases of the levy. So each year, the consumer price index is applied to what we were levied last year, and that is how much we can receive in the next year. Now, not all counties in Illinois are under this PTEL. DeKalb County is, most of our power counties around Chicago are, Chicago is, but then we have some counties to the west and some to the south that are not under this particular law, so they have a little more flexibility on a year-to-year basis. So there's three variables that change our levy request. It is the consumer price index, like I mentioned. Any new growth or TIF recovery that occurs through that tax year and the ability to capture that new growth, which is outside of the PTEL, and any change in the district's annual debt service schedule. So debt that we have that's paying off bonds for when we built the high school and elementary school, Cortland Elementary, and then did some renovations as well. Those were done about 10 or 11 years ago. Now, the tax extension can only increase by whatever the CPI was, and for the 2021 levy year, it's 1.4%, or 5%, whichever is less. And then they add the new property on that after the calculation is done. So here's a history of the consumer price index, since this is a big piece of additional dollars we can receive. So you can see it's been pretty erratic. When we go back here, back in 07-08, which would have been the 2005 calendar year, and it's been up and down quite a bit, actually to a point where it was only 1.1% in 1 year back in 2008. And then it's leveled out a little bit in these years here, and here's that 1.4% I talked about. And actually, over this whole period of time, we're averaging about 2%, right at 2%. Now, for the 22 year, this year, I'm sure you've heard all about inflation and the CPI being quite high. That would be the CPI we would use for the next tax levy year, for the 22 tax levy. So right now, we're looking just at that 1.4%. And here's a chart that gives you kind of a brief history, well, not too brief, since 2009, of where our equalized assessed value has been, and then what our tax rate history has looked like. So you can see here in 2009, we were pretty much at almost quite at our peak in terms of what our equalized assessed value was. And then the recession hit, and you can see how our equalized assessed value has gone down. And because of that, the tax rate actually goes up, because it's an inverse relationship. So you can see how that has dipped, and then pretty much starting here in 2016 is when we see a slight increase and then an increase in that equalized assessed value. Just everybody's property values is recovering from the economic downturn that occurred back in 2008, 2009. And also you can see our total tax rate, where it was and where it is now. And you can see as those, like I mentioned, when our EAVs were going down, those rates were going up, and now we're in that downward set because our EAVs are going up, so the tax rate is going down. And here I have 3 different lines in terms of the different tax rates. We have our total rate setting EAV, which are the bar charts. Then we have our limited tax rate, which is what we call our operating rate, because that is the rate that gets limited by that CPI number I was talking about. Then we have the rate here, that's down here, this flat rate, that's our bond and interest rate. So that is what is part of the rate that is related to paying our bonds off. So we've been intentionally trying to keep that flat through our bond restructuring process. And then this top one is actually the 2 together. I'm not going to go through this entire math problem, but I thought I'd put it out there for you so that those of you that like math and want to kind of walk through the calculation. But this is really how the county calculates our tax levy. It basically looks at where we were at the prior year, and this is based on the 2020 tax levy year, the actuals. So it always starts with where we were at in the prior year, so the 2019 EAV, and it goes through that whole process in terms of looking at the change in existing EAV and applying the new growth, and then going through these calculations to come up with our operating tax levy tax rate for 2020. Now remember, last year for 2020, we did not apply the 2.3% CPI increase. We wanted to keep that flat to save dollars for the taxpayer. So that was about $1.2 million that we did not tax the taxpayer for because we wanted to keep that levy as flat as possible. Next, and then, sorry, more math, but after we go through the operating levy calculation, then we look at what our annual debt service is that we need to pay off bonds. So for the 2021 annual debt service, which we received those levy dollars from the 2020 tax levy, was about $8.7 million. But what we did for last year is we abated our bond and interest for about $5 million because we received property tax relief grant dollars to do that. We did that for our 2019 levy as well as for our 2020 levy. And I have a slide after this to kind of get a little more detail of that. So really our adjusted debt service levy was $3.7 million as opposed to the $8.7 million. So really saving the taxpayers this $5 million because they did not have to pay that. We used state funds for that from the property tax relief grant. So when you add everything together, our operating levy as well as the debt service levy, the total extension was about $56.9 million. And then here is just really comparing where we were at in 2019 compared to 2020. So really the increase in our levy from that period of time was only 1.48%. Here is really just a history of where we are in terms of what we asked for, what we actually get extended, and what we actually received, because it's really 3 different numbers. So we're always asking for more than what we think we can get, because if you don't ask for it all, you don't capture that new property. So we're always, what we say, is balloon that levy, but we only can get what we legally can receive. So like last year, we asked for about $58.4 million, knowing we kind of brought it up there because it is based on estimates, and estimates can change. What was actually extended was $56.9 million, and what we actually received is about $56.6 million. So you can see there's 3 different variables in terms of what we're actually going to receive. And also we have some corporate tax abatements that are embedded in there as well. Which what that is the last one that we have left is with 3M, and that will end in this tax levy year. They're on the end of a 5-year tax abatement program. So taxpayer saving strategies, and I think you guys have seen this a number of times, but something to, especially now as we're going through this tax levy process. The things that we have done to try and keep the taxes level and to keep them under control is we've done abatements, bond and interest tax abatements. And basically what that an abatement is you're reducing the bond and interest tax levy which the taxpayer does not pay that portion of debt for that levy year. So we're not asking the taxpayer for it, we're paying for that on our own. So in 2018, we used $1,750,000 from our operating funds to evade bond and interest. In 2019, that's when we received the property tax relief grant. So we abated the 2019 levy in bond and interest for that $5 million, as well as 2020. We were required to do it in both of those levy years. After that $4.7 million that we received in the grant is now embedded in our evidence-based funding number, which I think when we do the budget, I showed that as well. We also went through a multi-year bond restructuring process, which we started back in 2016, and then we completed that back in April of 2020. We reached our goal to level that debt service, like I showed you on that line for with the bar chart, to keep that as level as possible, because it was scheduled to go up pretty high after the first 10 years of debt. So really throughout that whole process, we saved the taxpayers close to $30 million in interest savings, because we were able to take that debt, pay down some principal, as well as get a much better interest rate than we had 10 years ago. And we were able to drop the tax payment for a home that's worth about $150,000. It was going to be averaging about $601 a year, and now it's down to about $350 a year, which is a significant savings. Another thing we did, and I mentioned this before, we paid down principal throughout this process, because it's just like your mortgage. You pay down principal, you pay less interest in the long run. So we used some TIF surplus funds, $3 million in 2019 to do that when we were doing our 2019 restructuring. And in 2020, we used $10 million in our reserves to also pay down principal. It was very impactful. And again, utilizing those property tax relief grant dollars. Knowing that we had those, we were able to structure some debt to pay principal, higher principal amounts in the front end, so basically we had lower interest costs. And then again, like I mentioned, we had this permanent reduction in our 2020 operating tax levy, which the board chose to do and relaxed in the 2020 tax levy year. So that was about $1.2 million reduction in the levy each year and thereafter. So that $1.2 million is a permanent reduction, and it increases each year by the CPI, because that's the amount that we wouldn't be receiving otherwise. So it's a permanent cumulative savings to the taxpayer, but also a cumulative reduction in our revenue as well. But the board was very well aware that that was the result. And here's just some bar charts to kind of give you an idea of how our property here in CUSD428 boundaries is broken out. So by property type, the lion's share here, about 56% is residential property, which makes sense. But we also have a good share of commercial and industrial. And then we have mineral, which are the wind towers. Those are, I think most of them are to the south. And then we also have state railroad, because we do have obviously a lot of rail traffic here, so that's also part of our tax base. And then of course a large portion of farmland as well. Then we're also broken up into these various townships too, so we're just not DeKalb Township, we've got Cortland, we've got Malta. Then we have these other townships as well that are out in the rural areas. So just to kind of give you a kind of an idea of where our properties are located and what types of properties we have. And here we have talking about our tax increment finance districts, because this is very impactful for this levy year. So in the 2020 year, this is how it broke down in terms of our TIFs, our tax increment finance districts. We have this large pie here, which is the DeKalb Central Area TIF, about $59.3 million, which is a pretty large TIF. It actually, in 2021, this levy year is coming off. It's expiring. It's expiring a year sooner. So we will have access to that increment, which is about this number here, in this 2021 tax levy year, meaning that's like new construction to us. That's how it gets treated in the tax levy calculation. We also have here DeKalb TIF 2 that expired back in 2018. And if you remember, we were going through this process, we needed to make sure that we captured that new growth or that recoveries, and that was about close to $15 million, that we had access to that in the 2019 tax levy year. And then DeKalb TIF 3 is a newly created TIF that was created back in 2019. It was a carve out from TIF 1, which is this DeKalb Central Area TIF. And that was about $5.1 million. So really, once this TIF goes away, all that'll be left is a small Portland TIF, a Malta TIF, and a little bit of the DeKalb TIF 3. Much smaller footprint than it has been in basically 30 years, because that TIF has been around for quite some time. And then here is just a breakdown, just like with our rate setting, equal as assessed value that I showed before. This is really a breakdown of what's within these TIFs, from residential, commercial, industrial, and farm. And again, this will change quite a bit once this DeKalb central TIF is off the books. So tax levy considerations for 2021. Again, working with the assessor to get estimated EAVs. I pretty much go to them every couple weeks to see if they have a new report, to see if there's anything changed. As of October 7th, the rate setting EAV is about $914 million, which is about a 13% increase from the prior year. Big reason for that is the new growth that we're seeing with Farrar Candy. So that's another consideration we have to take to think about when we're going through our next tax levy process. And that is there is a 50% enterprise zone abatement agreement for 15 years, which that was approved a couple years ago, but now that's up and running. So only half of this EAV is what we'll see in our EAV, but we can capture the entire new growth in this fiscal year. Also, again, like I mentioned, the DeKalb area central TIF is going to be expiring. It's about $9.1 million. And then also 3M abatement, which is our last year of that particular abatement program. So there's a lot going on in this tax levy year, and a lot of calculations need to get done to estimate everything. The state property tax relief grant, if you recall in 2021, they did not allocate dollars towards this grant from the evidence-based funding formula because they didn't allocate additional dollars to that formula at all because of COVID and not knowing what the budget was going to look like. In 2022, those allocations are coming back, and so they've allocated $15 million again. We just received notification that we're number 37 on the list, and we are basically qualified. We're in line to qualify for this grant again, which is actually very good news, because that's an additional $5.5 million that we're required to, that we can receive. Our required abatement would be about $5.7 million, so we only have to take about $250,000 out of our operating funds in order to take advantage of the abatement. And it's the same rules that we're required to abate for 2 tax years. So our 2021 tax year, which affects our 22-23 budget, and our 22 tax year, which affects our 23-24. So we basically have 2 years that we have to abate. And most likely, I'm going to suggest we abate our bond and interest levy like we have in previous years. And then once those 2 required abatements are completed, then those funds come to us unencumbered and available for other purposes. Again, it's embedded just like the previous time in our evidence-based funding formula. I just put down here this property tax relief force that was created back in August of 2019. They kind of got started and then it just sort of fizzled, and we haven't really heard much about property tax freezes or anything like that from the state. Haven't really heard anything. It's just something we kind of keep our eyes on, but right now it's been pretty quiet related to that particular task force. So that is really just kind of sets the stage for the next couple of board meetings to get things taken care of with their tax levy. A lot going on, and I don't know if anybody has any questions. Or I know it's a lot. There's a lot of math. So, but if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. It does get complicated, especially for those board members that are new to this process, and even for those that have seen it a few times. It's once a year, and it's kind of have to put on that thinking cap again. So.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Okay, next up is Chromebook rotation cycle, Mr. Ben Bale. New business, this is information.
How's it going, everybody?
Good.
All right, so I'm coming to you very, very early in the Chromebook rotation cycle process. Typically, we do this in February, but we were awarded emergency connectivity funds through the FCC. So part of that is we need to get the ball rolling earlier to take advantage of those funds we will be receiving to offset some of our costs. So for the 22-23 school year, we are looking at 1,620 Chromebook devices, and that is to rotate first grade, fifth grade, and ninth grade students, as well as some staff devices. The devices we are looking at this year are Lenovo 500E Gen 3s. We have standardized on that model, and we have gone from the Gen 1s to the Gen 2s, now the Gen 3s. The Gen 3s are more robust, obviously, than the prior series, and the price has gone up slightly because the market has also gone up. So it has increased by approximately $50 per Chromebook. They are now $485 each, with a 4-year unlimited accidental damage plan, the licensing for content filtering, as well as Google. So with that, we still get a 5-year ROI out of each one of the devices. And with the emergency connectivity funds, we reached out to try to get funding for $785,700 of the total cost, and we received back $648,000 that they are willing to commit. So at this time, the district's cost for the 22-23 school year will be $137,700 out of the district's budget. So we have offset the $648,000. So I'm bringing it to you to hear how this is all going to work out. And the next board meeting will be an action item. Are there questions in regards to this process?
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Are there any, is there anything we have to do, like any deliverables we have for receiving this grant?
Yeah, so once it's really on the books with the distributor and we're invoiced for the purchase of the devices, that gets turned over to the FCC. Basically USAP, which is the same as E-rate, which we do annually as well to purchase a lot of networking equipment for the district. But then it's reimbursable. So we have an upfront cost and then they reimburse back that total cost up to that $648,000.
Do you know what the lag on that is?
Sorry?
What's the lag time on that reimbursement?
Yeah, that's why we're doing it now. The lag time on getting back the funds is not very long, but the lag time on getting everything on the books, invoiced through Lenovo, through the distributor, that takes some time. And I just don't want to run into the same issue we're running into right now, where we're just about to get our 2021 school year Chromebooks by the end of this month. So I just don't want to run into that issue for 22-23. So we're just trying to mitigate risk as well as offset costs.
Thank
Cool.
you.
All right.
Thanks, Ben.
That's
Thank you, Ben.
exciting.
Yep.
Okay, next up is revisit board calendar consideration. So this is to me. So I brought this up to Minerva as a consideration. So this is a discussion item for us that we potentially revisit our board calendar and consider going to one meeting a month right now, particularly during this time where there's so many high needs in the district, and you know, Minerva and Cabinet are, you know, have to spend a lot of time preparing for board meetings, getting everything together. And I was thinking it might be a consideration that we would make to free them up to take care of, you know, the needs of the district more so, and that if there was anything that came up, obviously we would want to check in with Cabinet to make sure that there was nothing that was pressing that needed to be approved. And if that's the case, then, you know, we could always call a special board meeting to approve items. But I think that based on conversations, you know, and obviously we can discuss this, it might be beneficial to free up our superintendent and Cabinet more to do the work they need to do in the district. Questions?
No, I think it's actually more common to have one than two
Sure.
in the state anyway, as far as the districts I'm familiar with. So I would be in favor of it. Sure.
What were you looking at
Yeah.
in terms of where the one fits in the month?
Sure, well, that's open for
Yeah.
discussion. I mean, we can talk that through, and I think obviously we would want input from Cabinet and, you know, and from you, Dr. Garcia Sanchez, as to what would be ideal.
I think one of the things was definitely consideration around a one-time starting perhaps in January, so upon our return. And there are instances during the year, especially for Cindy and finances, that we might have to do special meetings. usually at the beginning of the school year, I think is what we're finding. And also Tammy, as she's moving work forward, and we're doing the renovations of different, the HVAC and changing things that we might need to have special meeting at that time. But right now, I think as I've met with a few of them, not all of them, in relation to this, it seemed like this would be a good idea, but this is a good time for any of you to ask a question or clarification. Are you thumbs up, or, you know, this is the time to share that with the board.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as it relates to finance, so long as you're meeting, you know, budget adoptions, tax levy, you know, those types of, you know, like we were just talking about here. So those are pretty prescribed things, but we can probably get that fit in, or just create an extra meeting if we need to do that. Based on that calendar, it's pretty cyclical, so it's not, no surprises. And, you know, from my perspective, I'm thinking if we always do it maybe that third meeting of the third Tuesday of the month, because that's really our business meeting like we have here. We approve our accounts payable monthly. We have personnel agenda items we have to get approved. I guess maybe that's something future we need to speak on, because that seems to be a pretty constant thing, so we might have to think about how that would work through, so.
Sure. And if there's a specific, I mean, like, obviously, like with the levy adoption and then things with the budget, you know, we could, you know, just have, you know, like you said, they're cyclical, they happen at the same time every year. So perhaps those are months where we would have 2 meetings because, you know, that's how it would work, but.
So are you considering this as a going forward, we would just have 1 meeting?
Well, I was thinking beginning in January.
And then like forever or temporarily?
Well, I think definitely now during this time where the needs are so high in the district. And then, I mean, we can see how it goes if it's, you know, not something that's working well, or if it's an issue, we could always come back to what we're doing now. But if it's something that
Is there a reason you're asking?
Yes. What would it look like? So kind of like what Cindy alluded to. We have things that are informational, and then we generally have 2 weeks to kind of think about them, do whatever research we need to do, and then we have action.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm wondering, would everything be pushed into information and action all at once, or you would wait a month in between rather than 2 weeks?
I mean, I think, I just want to add that there's a lot of footnoting that I feel that we would be able to do as far as the team is concerned, so that you would have information a lot sooner than right before a meeting, instead of a Thursday or Friday right before a board meeting, that we would be able to upload things as they were being developed, so you have access to those documents, so that you're front loaded. If there's something that's popping up that's important, I can definitely share that with all of you, and then you'd have that information.
Well, related to that, I guess I'm wondering about transparency for the community, so that they are aware of something also before we are acting on it.
Right, and I think that, I mean, we could take a look at other districts too and see how soon they release information, because potentially we could put out our agenda sooner than the Thursday before, if we're only doing it once a month. So that way, like, you know, the community has time to look at it, and if there are issues, they can email us, they can, you know, obviously attend the board meeting and share their concerns, or, you know, communicate that way. So.
Well, I think we still can give the information and then have a subsequent action. We just have to, you know, you guys, honestly, most of the pressure would be on you and you, Minerva, just to make sure you're a month ahead of schedule. I think our meetings might go a little bit longer, but at the end of the day, I don't think that we have to necessarily have 2 meetings in order to do it. And, you know, I've been attending monthly board meetings forever, and it always seems to work out. So, I mean, you just got to be a month ahead of time on stuff you want to get done is all. It's just a different cadence, I think, to adopt, but I think it would allow more time for you, obviously, to make an impact on the district and less time preparing for meetings. So I'm always about that.
I mean, that's really the idea behind it, is that we free up,
Absolutely,
you know, the superintendent and cabinet to be able to not be focusing on getting things ready for the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is like, if we continue that way, it's not a problem. I'm just saying that what it does, it takes, and rightfully so, it takes time and, you know, process to be able to do that. We want to make sure we give the best information, that you have what you need for meetings. But it feels like it's, once we're done with the meeting, we're just into the next session of the meeting, and really, we want to be able to build up enough of the data and things to be able to share. Our meetings currently have taken, and the last few have been 30 to 45 minutes, depending, and I think that's fantastic, but not to say that we want to prolong them, but if we need to have a longer meeting on a session, or we need to wait on something because we, have to have a special meeting, if it's not enough information at that moment, and we say, you know what, we need a special meeting to be able to do that, then we can be flexible about that. And if it doesn't work, we can come back to 2 meetings per month.
Yeah, I mean, because if you feel like you were just saying, I mean, if we are ever presented with something that's information and an action, and anyone is not feeling comfortable with it can always get pulled and be action or information, and then move to action.
A special meeting.
Either a special meeting
or we wait till the following month.
So, and this is informational, so we can, there's time to think about it.
I think it is important for us to free up a lot of the time. I mean, I know that even when we do have one of those 45 to an hour board meetings, it takes a long time, like days, and up to 2 weeks of just preparation to get that ball rolling for that meeting. So if it could free up a lot of that time, I think it only makes sense.
And again, the point of it is that we want to make sure that even, that we are being very iterative of what you get, and that it's very, that the data that you do get, that what we give you is imperative for decisions that you make. So if it's something that you need more time with, and I can see the trepidation on your face around what that looks like. I have no problem with, definitely if we need to continue the conversation, we can do that.
Sure.
I don't want you to feel like this is not a decision-making opportunity, it's just something for us to put out there in case it can happen. And if you feel very strongly, we'll listen to them. I'm okay with doing 2 months. I'm just trying to be efficient, right? But definitely.
And it was my idea.
and I concur.
This district used to have one meeting, and for a very long time, actually, my father-in-law was on the school board for years, and I don't know why we switched to 2 a month, but it is very unusual. It is not typical whatsoever. I mean, in terms of other districts, so I don't know who did that or why. I wasn't here, but anyway.
Well, I think a lot of the issues around why that happened are not things that happen anymore, so it's different. So. But that's just that was my idea and my recommendation. I wanted to bring that to all of you to consider.
Have you thought about perhaps how long you want to try it before we say go back to 2 a month, or let's stick with it? You have maybe like a year in mind, 6 months?
Sure. I guess my mind was thinking, as long as the district is having such intense needs, and we're, people are, just having, it's this way across the nation, schools are in crisis mode, districts are in crisis mode, and so to, at least get through that, and to see, if that's helpful and effective, in terms of supporting.
We have members just sitting over there that travel quite some distance to be here, and I know Cindy isn't going to get home until very late every night at a board meeting. So the consideration is also involved. But I know she probably doesn't care, but I think it's something to think about.
And I mean,
we can do the spring, or just check on it like in the fall.
It's totally open. I'm just suggesting it, whatever everybody thinks. And
I mean, since we already have things going on, if we really wanted to consider, we could kick it off as of January and just finish up the year with that new calendar, and then just see how it goes. And if it doesn't work, then we go back to, revisiting it again at the end to kick off the school year on that, twice a month board meetings. But it would just make sense. So I appreciate the idea, Sarah.
well, thank you.
Yeah, it was good.
Could we bring it back for at next meeting for discussion and
Consensus to bring it back?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. And then next up is actually rescheduling our November 2nd board meeting because, sorry, we didn't have to watch. Next, so this is rescheduling the November 2nd board meeting because Dr. Garcia Sanchez will actually be in the air flying, so she can't connect remotely. So we need to just pick a date. If everybody has their schedule available, we could do, that Monday, I think.
What about the Wednesday right after, like on the?
Oh, yeah, I need your calendar actually first, because you have to be here. So,
Sorry.
4 of us have to be here, but you're the important one in terms of the loan.
I just know that
So what
the
do you?
3rd, 4th, and 5th, I think, whatever that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is, I'm in Nashville, so.
Okay, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, okay, so you wouldn't be here.
I can't do the 3rd either.
I also would not be here the 3rd.
Okay, so the 3rd's out. Are you here the 4th?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
Yeah.
would we have, we could try and push it to the next week if like the 8th?
I
Is that-
am definitely in Chicago that week, so.
So you're not around that, okay.
It's the week before I'm gone, the week of the 8th I'm here.
Oh, you're here?
I'm in the area.
Okay, so you can be here. Okay, so.
I'm not available on the 8th.
Okay.
I'm available on the 8th.
Would everybody else say what your availability is? Like 9? Yes? Yes?
I'm available all month.
All right.
I might be a
Just
little
be
late,
that
but I
way.
could do the 9th.
That's a little.
Okay,
too bad.
that works. Sam?
Yep.
The 9th?
We can do the
There's
9th.
no traffic.
So will we have our other meeting on the 16th?
Yeah, we won't move that.
Okay.
So that'll be fun and tight. But, unless we want to try doing the 4th, and would we have a quorum, and would you be, like Jeremy's not going to be here the 4th?
I can do the 4th.
Because that would be crazy kind of having to.
It actually just depends on what time my flight gets in, but
Okay, so you could
I'm
potentially
coming
be
home
here.
that night. I just don't know what
Okay.
time my flight gets in. I
Okay.
don't have that in front of me.
So on Thursday, I'm not
Thursday the
available.
4th? You're not, Daisy? Amanda?
Yeah, I am.
Chance? David?
I can be.
Ari? Sam?
I can be there on the 4th.
Okay, so, are you okay with us doing the 4th? Okay.
Jackie?
Jackie, you're here?
Yep.
Good, okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and do that board meeting on the 4th. Is there a motion to move the November 2nd board meeting to November 4th? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Sarah Moses,
Yes.
Ariel Owens,
Yes.
Jeremy Olson,
Sure. Yep.
Daisy Ramirez,
Yes.
David Seymour,
Yes,
Amanda Harness,
Yes.
Samantha McDavid.
Yes.
and that's 7 o'clock.
Yeah, unless we have closed session, it should be 6. Okay, next is recommended revisions to board policy 6:235. Ms. DeTrosalis.
Good evening. Actually, this agenda item and the next are both policies related to our technology use and our agreements. We had some some violations to our technology It tries to train me very well, so I caught myself. Some violations to the use of our technology, both devices and our network services. So we took our policies, shared them with our legal counsel. They provided some revision, suggested language for both of these policies, and I'm bringing them to you for review. And they will come to the next meeting for approval. So you can review them. There's both the redlined item and then there's the policy revised, so you can see it cleaned up. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to entertain those.
Any questions? Okay. Consensus to bring this back?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
And then, so both of those, items E and items F.
I'm sorry.
Did you cover item F as well?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so,
Yes,
so
I
item E
can.
and item F, consensus from you. You have a question, Jeremy?
I was just making sure those were together.
Cool, okay. And then, next is item G, staffing request, Director of Grants, Ms. DeTrosalis.
Grants that we've been awarded, as well as grants that we need to identify and we need to apply for. In that work, there's a lot of financial oversight that goes with that, but there's time and effort recordings, and then there's data that supports that. So that work has been part of many people's work but we want to pull that apart, make it separate, more intentional, and we want to make it more real for the district.
Is there a more significant need with that now during COVID? Are there more
Yes,
grants available?
at times, there are some grants that may have very specific parameters. There are some others that through ISB that we may qualify for based upon our district designation, but nevertheless, they do require some background work where we have to provide data, we have to provide information to support what they're looking what the grant is designed to support.
Okay, so potentially, well, obviously, that this position would be a position that would generate revenue.
Yes, it would.
And it would be significant, or would it,
The intention is to be significant, absolutely. There are many grants out there, not just through ISB, not just through the state of Illinois, but throughout the whole country that we could identify and make ourselves more competitive for. Some are driven by core instruction, some are driven by technology, STEM, mathematics, social emotional, absolutely. So having an individual dedicated to this work, part of that would be identifying these grants and then putting forth the efforts to go to complete the application process and do the research to support it.
Right. And there's a number of pieces of compliance that goes along with that, and that's very time consuming for someone to be able to do that. And making sure that lines up obviously to our strategic plan as well as ISB's directives around social, emotional, and support around instruction as well. So this person would have to have an academic background to be able to ensure that there's alignment and convergence between both.
I wanted to kind of continue on where Sarah left off, because that's kind of where I was going to. I'm more concerned about, is this position going to pay for itself? In other words,
right,
are you sort of hedging your bets that the salary and compensation for this person would be more than covered by additional grants coming in that we would not normally get?
Well, very similar to what Ben shared about the, tell me what that.
Emergency Connectivity Fund?
Yes, Emergency Connectivity Fund. That freed up over $600,000 for the district. So that exceeds one salary of any administrator in this district. So absolutely, identifying those grants and being able to free up monies that we currently have earmarked for projects or curriculum or things of that nature would in turn pay for the position.
Okay, so I guess my only request is going to come back to the same thing I've said the last 3 times that we've added a position, which is I know that we're all hedging our bets on the fact that these things are going to do a plethora of things and beautiful KPIs that I want to talk to Philip about. But long story short is, are we going to be looking at what our history is in grant writing and acceptance in terms of the number and quantity and quality, and then comparing that going forward? Because I really do think we need to start justifying when we create positions. I don't think we willy-nilly create them and just let them exist for perpetuity. I think we really do need to at least take an annual view of the effectiveness, if you will. Because either A, it just didn't work, or B, maybe we have the wrong person, or let's hope it was wildly successful and we'll pat ourselves on the back and making this move. But I would like to see that for any of the positions we're adding, frankly, as a board member. Is just, are we effective in this new structure? Because I think we're all supportive of it. I think we just want to make sure we're seeing the outcome. So that's the only thing I would share with you, I guess, in that regard.
And I would say that happens through the evaluation process. So as we evaluate employees and the work that they're doing, is it the right work? Is it the right person doing the work? That happens somewhat naturally through that process. It may not seem like we look at position X and say, do we need it, do we not need it? But it does happen through that evaluation process. But we could absolutely build some more intentional efforts around looking at positions and making those determinations.
I think part of that is also going along, Jeremy, with some of the assessments, the pre-assessments that you had mentioned to Dr. Garcia Sanchez last time, and some of the things that are actually being implemented now. So a lot of that work a lot of those conversations have been happening about creating these assessments for self-assessments to evaluate whether or not the practices or the positions are working, or we need to make adjustments as the changes are happening within the district and the needs of the district. So there was a lot of conversation about that in the last couple of meetings about it. So, but I don't think you were here. So, but yeah, definitely it's something that continues to come up, and making sure that we are being reasonable with the positions that we are obviously approving, and understanding that the district has different needs, and as the needs are actually evolving, that we're taking all that into consideration as we are revamping some of these positions, the titles, or even the descriptions of what we are approving, so.
Definitely, positions are pretty fluid, right? So where we need it, we're in a space right now, and eventually those spaces change, right? When we've been able to cover what we need to or move on. So eventually, we need to feel okay with being in a space that titles are fluid, right? We're not taking away anything else from the individual. We're just making sure that they're just not honed into sticking to something where we need, making sure that we're filling a gap where we need it, as Deidre said. But we're cognizant of it. I got you.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I just also want the good people at the DeKalb to hear that we thought this through and we're not willy-nilly just making a bunch of hires, but we're making strategic bets.
Yes.
Not driving revenue.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you for pointing out, that's good. Any other questions about that? Okay. Next up is strategic plan update, Dr. Garcia Sanchez.
So this is really my superintendent report and presentation. There's 4 pieces I just want to make sure that I get to tonight. The first one is, while I was in Washington, D.C., we presented to over 80 superintendents across the country. I was interviewed by the former state superintendent of Hawaii, Dr. Christina Kishimoto. And because of the interview that she facilitated with me, Discovery Plus Education read it and has reached out to us and is giving one of our junior or senior students a full scholarship to the National Policy Leadership Program. So that's exciting because it gives us DeKalb a lift up into this opportunity. We've selected Berenice Rivera Munoz, who is a junior. I believe she's done some things with the district before, and James Horner was the one that actually, and with support from Val, was able to go through and select the most appropriate student for this. So we're really excited. We got the form signed off by Mom today, and she's getting started. That actually starts this week, so we're really excited for her. We expect that what she learns, she'll be able to bring back, and then the 2 of you can partner, and we can really blow this place apart for all of our students, right? We're going to do some phenomenal things. So I'm really excited about that. Next up, another great thing, the board has graciously agreed to ensure that each one of our teachers receives a $1,000, what is it, a stipend to use.
Cindy can explain.
Right. Cindy, how do you want me to call this? But $1,000 for every teacher to be able to use for their classroom. So teachers, we tend to say, as I recall, I spend a lot of my money from my own pocket to buy things for the classroom. This is an opportunity to have $1,000 made available to all of our teachers to support them in anything that they might need for their classroom. So what are we calling that, Cindy? What is that? I don't want to call it a stipend if it's not a stipend. What is the right word?
Resources for supplies, I guess, or dollars to spend on students in their classroom.
Okay,
or
so
the needs that they need, that they feel they need in their classroom. So.
Okay, so we're making sure it happens. More details to follow.
And it can be something that they need, like that supports them in their classroom.
In their classroom, right. So something that they would use in the classroom for teachers, just like they might buy some manipulatives or a piece of technology or some kind of supply that they might want to use in the classroom. So they will each have then $1,000 to be able to use that for. Right? Correct, Cindy?
Correct.
All right. Thank you to the board for that on behalf of all of our students and our teachers. I'm excited for that. The next thing that I'd like to share is we were so excited that we got our Kpis, Key Performance Indicators, for our strategic plan. So all of you should have a copy of that. Within that, you'll notice what data we'll be collecting and looking at based on each one of our components for our priorities. Chance, if you'd like me to explain a little bit more, I'll be happy to share it with you so we can go over it. And what this does, it tells us that based on each one of our priorities, what we're going to be looking at if we're meeting our metrics, right? So milestones are still in the process of being figured out and what that data will, how it will connect, and we will share that. And then we will then be able to let you know if we're on track, behind track, or as we did in our last meeting, we were able to do that, and now we'll have data that will support that for you as well. Okay? Yes?
There's a couple that I want to talk to Philip about, but I'm excited. Very positive. So thank you, well done.
And thank you for the work that you're doing and your leadership and everyone else as well, and for putting DeKalb on the map.
Look, I'm just going to take the credit, but all of those folks out there and the
Definitely.
teachers that aren't in the room that actually did this work, it's on them. I think the union leaders actually mentioned it, that there's a number of them that wrote the milestones and that have been able to talk about the strategies. We had 104, right, for the month of September. And this is a unified school district that is doing this work. It's not just the folks on the sidelines, it's everybody here. So I'm eternally grateful. I mean, I'm grateful that the work is happening. So thank you to everybody.
So are we. Thank you for everything.
Absolutely. So, take a look. If there's questions or we need to clarify a little bit further, but we are really far on track to ensure that we are giving you the reports that you are requesting.
And congratulations to the student also that was awarded that. That's amazing.
Thank you. So one last thing. So, if we're taking a look at our priorities, priority under improvement and innovation, number 1, develop and support the district's multi-tier systems of support. Then under curriculum and instruction, implement high-quality curricula to ensure classrooms that reflect high expectations and rigorous instruction. Differentiate instruction based on the linguistic and academic needs of our ELLs. Develop learning structures for administrators, faculty, and staff. Under student services, implement restorative practices in all 12 schools. I had a wonderful conversation. Anybody know who this is? Muhammad Khalifa?
Yes.
I just spent yesterday an hour with him.
Wow.
And we are going to be able to work out a professional development series with him live and in person here in DeKalb if we so choose to. And it will be a 2.5 day. We have 50 seats initially, and then in the spring we'd like to bring him back again for another 50 seats. He's all in to do this work. We're going to make sure that we reach out to everyone to see who gets seats on this. But we're really excited about it because as we talk about culturally responsiveness for school leadership and instruction, so it's not just one piece, but it's everything. And it totally lines up to the work that we're doing in relation to our KPIs and our strategic plan. So I just wanted to make sure I share that with you. We'll need to bring it back next time in relation to what the proposal will be, and then move that forward. Cindy, I should have maybe talked to you about this today, just to kind of go over it. But we're going to spend a little money, but it's definitely well worth it, and it lines up to the work that we really want to do. So that's it for me. Questions?
That's a surprise.
I know.
That's extremely exciting. Thank you
Yes.
for making that happen.
Yep.
It's really, really awesome.
Questions?
I was just going to say that the $1,000 for teachers for materials for their classrooms will be on the next agenda for a vote. So obviously we have to approve that in a meeting, but that is something that the board has discussed and is
Thank you.
in favor of. And yeah, so we obviously appreciate our teachers tremendously. We are grateful for you and all of the hard work that you do. And we just want to be able to make sure that you have the things that you need in your classrooms. We know that you do spend a lot of your own money, and it's something that we can do now when things are really difficult and challenging. So, any other comments or questions about that? All right. Next is the meeting will be adjourned. Is there, or all in favor?
I have to have a motion. So moved.
Oh, do I? Oh. We're meeting if I didn't mess it up once.
You just got so excited.
I did. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.